Okay, so sure, that was good. Some heartfelt thoughts there, but I think we both have a little bit more that we could talk about on this particular topic. So let's cue that intro and pick up where we left off. Okay, dude. So I know I kind of ended things off on our last clip with any new collector, just find your why, find your heartfelt reason for collecting. But as you were talking previously, I had a few thoughts that ran through my head, and the first one that leapt into my mind was getting caught up. One of the other addictions that's linked to trying to have every, I suppose you could say, issue of something is, I know it's something that's quite close to you, is variant covers. Um, and for those that don't know, a variant cover is quite succinctly, it's the publishers will release an issue of a comic book. It has a standard intended cover for the general market out there, and nowadays there's these variant covers, an alternate cover. So it's the same comic book, just a different cover or different packaging, if you like, on top of it. And I think I stand to be corrected. The first variant cover that came out was Man of Steel #1, written by John Byrne by DC Comics. It had two covers. It had a Superman standing on the cover kind of thing, and then it had a zoomed in cover of him pulling open, and it's just a giant S. And that one, I think, was the more popular cover out of all of them. And I think that was actually the variant cover to it. And then subsequently, Marvel kind of caught on to that idea and said, "Ooh, okay, so we can do variant covers too, and we'll take it one step further. We'll do special covers." And then you had covers coming out with foil embossed on them, so the title of the comic might have been in gold foil or reflector foil. There was a craze in the 90s where they had chromium, which was like it's almost like a molded, pressed, metal-looking kind of cover wrapping the comic there. So certain #1s or starts to major events would have these special chromium covers, and then other title or other publishers jumped onto that bandwagon too. Image Comics for a while in the 90s, they were famous for variant covers coming out, but all the while, initially in the beginning, the sort of sanity that people would apply was stock standard cover A and then variant cover B, and very often variant cover B was a bit harder to get, i.e. for every 10, 50, 100 of the normal that we make, we'll do one of these variant covers there. That was kind of how it started, and I think you could talk a little bit more to where it's gone now and your sort of experience with variants.
Yeah, so it's around where I think where you talked about that. Another good example was X-Men 1, which is the most sold comic in the world. And I think that has something like 7 different covers. I can't even remember, or 5 different covers. I lost track.
No, it had 4 different covers. And the idea was each one was a part of a larger picture there. And then there are 2 other covers that came out subsequently, because there was a second and I think even a third printing of that particular comic.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're all out there. I think the record is about 8 million copies of that thing floating around.
Yeah. So, and that actually ties in perfectly to what I wanted to. So what's happened is you've got this thing where now there's always standardly an A and a B cover, but then the publishers are finding every reason to, like, print more comics, get people to buy them and stuff. And I bought into that hype, where and you'll get collectors that collect an artist's only cover. So every time there's a variant, even if they're not interested in the title at all, they need that cover.
Yeah.
If they're a J. Scott Campbell cover collector or whatever the case is. And I bought hard into it at a stage, and it was Batman Rebirth, issue 1. There was after New 52, everyone assumed that the Quarter L storyline, issue 1 also, it went up drastically. So they thought the same was going to happen with Batman Rebirth, and everyone lost their minds. And there was even a pre-one-shot, like an issue 0, but you didn't. It said 1, but it was actually anyway. Okay. And I went on this rant, but as a Batman collector, and I'm like, no, this is the run. I'm going to do this. And I imported every single print that I could get hold of, and after going on CLZ, if people don't know what CLZ is, it's an app that helps you track what comics you have. And the nice thing is often they will, when they update their database, you'll see what you're missing. Especially if you're
they'll
collecting
put all the different variants there, yeah.
And at the end of the whole exercise, I think I was down to almost 30 issue ones.
Of Batman Rebirth #1.
It was different covers, different prints, different a Walmart exclusive print where they only hand them out in Walmart. There was a Jim Lee cover only. There was a, it was his pencil, and then there's a color variant, and then a sketch variant, and then a second print sketch variant, and then you know probably a bit more about this, which is Aspen, which is was owned by Michael Turner. He passed away.
Sadly, yeah.
And they still got all this old archived art of his, and magically it's a Michael Turner cover. The guy's not around anymore, but now there's a Michael Turner cover. So everyone runs around, and there was 3 different covers of those, and it just went on and on and on and on. And I was like, and every time was, it was like a drug. And then I woke up one day and I'm like, I still haven't read Batman Rebirth. Like.
Yeah, but let's talk to you at the time. There's something that I do think is quite magical about comic collecting. It's sometimes the hunt. So you and I both have our lists of certain things, be it certain issues or certain signed comics or whatever. There's a list, and periodically we go on a quest to track down certain issues. So I can certainly get the hunt aspect of you trying to track down all of those variant covers.
Being all the way in South Africa, and a lot of them were numbered and all of that, but dude, that's the thing. Like, again, this might sound like a contradiction because you talked about, that you got in the previous video a bunch of Deadpools for really cheap when no one knew what they were about, and similar thing happened to me. I was in our legit local comic book store, and I walked in and I was scrunging through all the back issues, and I took out New Mutants 87. People that don't know, it's first appearance of Cable.
We're probably going to flash that up on the screen for those.
and my logic was, again, this is when I was still in the full-on key hunting thing. I'm like, if they've made Deadpool, they're going to make Cable. This was even before they started talking about, what's his name?
Deadpool 2.
Yeah, but the actor, how can I not think
Josh Brolin.
Yeah, Josh Brolin, all this. Before that, I was like, they kind of tied together, whether you like it or not, if you even know a little bit about this story. I literally went up to the counter and as an idiot, I went up and I showed the cover to him. I'm like, is this the first appearance of Cable? And the owner, just dazed and obviously doing something else, he's like, no, it's not the first appearance of Deadpool. I'm like, not Deadpool, Cable. And he's like, yeah, it is. And I bought it for $30. Now, for any context, that's about like $1 or $2. And I
think it's worth around $1,000-$2,000 nowadays.
Yeah. So and so when I went home, the first person I spoke to is a person you mentioned in our old videos. He's a big mentor at the time to me, which his name was Oliver. Yeah. That you mentioned. And I said, Ollie, is this what I think it is? And he's like, yeah. At that time, he's like, yeah, it's about $100 comic. And now it's sitting in that $200, $250, and it kind of fluctuates and varies. So yes, that hunt was like so cool, and we still go on those hunts. But if that's all it's about, that's when it gets dangerous. And when you're just trying to screw people over to find like that, exactly what you told, that attic,
Yeah.
And that's what happened to me, dude. It was just all about what collection I can get a hold of and how I can score, and that's when it got like, just really weird, and it felt pointless. There was no joy left. So
there's nothing worse than there's something to be said about the hunt, but then if there's no love or a why attached to the hunt, then like exactly what you've just said, a couple months, a year, whatever it is down the line, you look over the bounty or the results of your hunt, and it means nothing to you. You look at it and there's almost a degree of buyer's remorse, like, why did I do this?
So it's such a great triggered a thought. And that's the other thing that happens, because we talked about like this addiction factor, and then say for instance you've got this new love of Deadpool, so then you go out and you get the New Mutants 98 and you get 2 or 3 copies because you buy this like artifact statue and a sideshow statue, and you buy all the TPs and you buy all the comics, and all of a sudden you've spent like $50,000 in 1 month and you're in this mad amount of credit card debt. What happens the first thing that happens is two things. Is if you hit a rough patch, you sell all of that. We see it happen over and over again.
Sure.
And it's a luxury that you're getting rid of. But also what happens is because you bombard yourself with so much at once, you don't take the time to appreciate it. It gets stored in a cupboard.
Yeah. Sure.
And that's what I like about the way I've changed, where I get that 1 or 2 TPs a month, and every now and then I'll get an expensive comic, because you get time to savor that and understand why you bought it, and like sort of bask in that why, like whereas you're just bombarding and like nailing your credit card, like and you're filling the cupboard. It's like, I don't have space for this, but it's awesome anyway. Like, and how many guys do you know that have a whole cupboard full of statues and they still haven't opened when they sold it? It's like still sealed. I'm like, why the hell did you buy it?
Right. I'm with you. Dude, I ran those things. I mean, talking about variant comics, I've still got all my copies of X-Men #1, and I held on to them for 2 reasons. Firstly, it's the biggest selling comic book of all time, and I'll speak to a little bit about that now. Secondly, is I've got a whole bunch of Image variants that came out in the early days of Image, and each one, there was a regular cover and then there was a Whilst Portatio variant. And if you got all 8 of the Whilst Portatio variants, you can lay them out and they would form a larger, bigger puzzle piece with all these characters intertwined. And I loved that idea. Back then, that made sense to me from a variant sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's a image spanning idea. This guy's doing one big picture, and it'll all be broken down. And if you track down all of these different covers, put them together, it makes a larger whole that's quite cool and visually appealing. I love that idea. So I've still got, those are really the only variants I still have in my collection, and that's partly the reason for it. For those that don't know, I started collecting when semi-young. I had a couple comics as a kid, and then really a big collector in my teens through to my 20s, 30s, etc. And worked in a comic shop, as I mentioned in the last video. And there, dude, you want to talk about the addiction getting out of hand. when you're at the source almost, or you're one notch away from the source, and you just, all the stuff, month in, month out, you see what's coming, man.
It's
and
don't pay me a salary, just put it on my tab.
Dude, that's exactly where it got to, because I was working a normal 9 to 5, and then I was working weekends at the comic store, and the basic agreement was, don't pay me to work at the comic store, just I'll run a tab and I'll just work off the tab.
That's insane.
That's how crazy it got, man. And then, yeah, it literally got down to a point, I remember to this day, I was sitting at home. I had the girl that I was dating at the time, and we invited my late father and his fiance over for lunch. And we were sitting, we were talking. I was just changing jobs. And at the time I was in a job where I had a company car, all those kinds of luxuries. And we were just talking about things. And one of the things that came up was, I have to try and source a car. The company car luxury is going to be gone when you change jobs, etc., etc. What are you going to do? Find the money? And I was like, yeah, thinking about it. And in that, my father was like, well, why don't you sell some of your comics? And at the time, it was almost horrifying, that suggestion to me. I was like,
how dare you?
Yeah, I can't sell my comic books. No, never. And my dad, I loved him, because my dad and I were like, almost like, we had a father-son relationship, but also at times almost like best friend relationship too. And he just, like, openly, honestly, he said to me, just tell me truthfully, how often do you go through those boxes that you've got, 100 or so comic boxes, and how often do you actually pull out comics and read them? And I said to him, well, hardly ever, because the stories that I want to read, ironically or stupidly or whatever you call it now, I buy the graphic novel, the trade paperback, the collected edition, and then I reread it there. And then it goes on a bookshelf, so that if I ever want to read it third, fourth, whatever time, it's accessible on the bookshelf. My father went, well, don't you see the insanity right there? These things just sit up in your spare room. They're gathering dust, or the boxes are gathering dust anyway, and you just don't. So why don't you just go through them and see which ones have sentimental value to you for whatever reason? And there are quite a few of them. There are some that when my dad went overseas, he went to a comic shop and spent a day in a comic shop for me, buying me comics and brought them all back. Family overseas, and when they came to visit, they brought me various collected stories and things like that. So there's certain ones that friends bought me, family bought me, that for some odd reasons, the stories, the artists, whatever, gravitate. And I've got a small, still singular comic book collection that I held on to for nostalgic reasons and sentimental reasons. But for the most part, my massive version 1 of my comic book collection I sold. And fun little side story, the money that I made of selling that collection bought me the car that I have today.
Wow. Sure. That's insane, dude.
Yeah, that's crazy, but that's also the insanity of how much. Yeah. Anyway, but and
Yeah, how far you can go down that rabbit hole, like.
Yeah, and a lot of my collection was me going and getting caught up in the back issue box diving, rifling week in, week out, going to comic book stores, going through their back issue boxes, finding things to plug holes in my collection because I wanted to have a full run, consecutive issues, etc. I'd bring stuff in from overseas through My Comics, my comic shop, all of that to fill gaps in my run, and I've still got friends that do that, and there's some fun and merit in it too, but my why wasn't there, my reason. When I looked at it and I started sorting it, it was like 80% of this, 90% of it had no connection to me, no nostalgic. I just didn't need it, and I was quite happy to then get rid of it. And that really accelerated collection 2.0, which is my graphic novel collection. And there, at that time, I made this decision. I wanted to have a full, comprehensive, all-encompassing library of comics. I heard stories. I think it's the Oppenheimer family. Their house here in Johannesburg, they've got the largest privately owned book collection in the world. And yeah, something about that resonated with me, and I thought I would like to have, probably won't ever be the largest, but so it gave me a graphic novel, comic book, collection of notes, something on these shelves that on a daily basis, every time I walk past it, I could look at it and go, I'm proud of this. There's, in my opinion, and in the general opinion, there's issues in there that are widely considered to be some of the greatest stories ever told.
Yeah. Some
of the greatest comics ever written, drawn, whatever the case might be. And yes, there's also stuff in there that probably is uniquely, appeals to me and me alone, or me in a small handful. But in that same breath, there's also, you can look it up, the top 100 or whatever. And I've been on a quest on that hunt to try and track down those graphic novels, those collected editions, and make sure that they're in my collection. Whether I get to read them or not, I don't know, but just to say, you know what, if someone says this is good, hey, it's in my collection there.
Yeah, because that's another thing to consider. I didn't think about this until now, but I mean, we're at a time where, look, there will always be a secondhand market, no matter what. But I think from a generational point of view, we're going to wake up one day and printed comics are going to be people are going to be like, why'd you print a comic? Because everyone's going to be so indoctrinated into iPads or AR, or imagine AR comics. You put these glasses on and you're like in the world of like where Batman is like running past you, and
yeah, man, could happen.
And I just hope all the artists get to keep their jobs because I know they work hard. But yeah, dude. So that in itself, yeah, it's.
I'm not encouraging everyone that what you're talking about, that's why I want the library for historical preservation purposes, which also speaks to why I still own the Death of Superman comic, the first XMen #1. These are, for me, little pieces in modern comic history, and I want those in my library for one day, like you say, be able to pull out the physical thing and show it to someone.
Yeah, there was also a justification, still is a little bit for me. Again, it's going to sound like a contradiction with the whole key collecting thing, but that is why I wanted like these really old books and these first appearances of my favorite characters and teams, because to me, like if I have like a grandson one day or whatever the case is, and they like, you know, Batman will still be a thing, I'm sure, by then. And I can be like, well, this is where Batman came from. I don't have a Detective Comics 27. I don't know if I ever will. But things like that, where you like, you've got a book from like the 50s or 60s, you know, like, and you're like,
Sure.
this is where it all started, you know, like, and no one knew it then. So, you know, yeah, I think again, but they're going to cost exorbitant amounts. But it's just that idea of owning a piece of history, like it's just like, yeah, it gives me a certain amount of satisfaction. And that's not because I've had that debate with myself a million times, and I often chuckle at myself because when I was key collecting, I'm like, I'm going to buy this because I can flip it and it's going to be worth so much one day. If you have a book that you really love, you're not going to sell it, period. You have to,
No.
so you're going to leave it to kids or kids, and they will or won't give a shit about it. And then it will go away and sell. So it's literally for your satisfaction. So stop tricking yourself into thinking it's for investment, you know, like,
Sure.
that's just, yeah. And look, there are people that it is straight up investment, but then they have no attachment to it.
100%. And then
So,
for me, there's no real meaning to it. There's no food for the soul if you're doing it for that reason. And that's sad.
agreed, man. I'd have nothing to add to that. And maybe it brings them some kind of happiness, but I just don't see it anymore. Because, and again, it may be a bit arrogant to only speak of my experience, but that's the only one that I've got to speak to, and it just becomes empty and soulless very quickly. And that's why I just don't want anyone else to experience that, because it can spoil collecting for you. I've seen a lot of people that it does collect, you know, they sell everything and they just disappear.
Yeah.
And it's because they spoiled collecting for themselves, because, you know, and it's probably going to organically come to an ending now, but it comes back to the exact point you mentioned in the previous video. It's because there's no why. I don't know, we've bashed that in by now, but it's because there's so much truth in it.
Yeah.